Go to iCloud.
Oh,
Done.
התחיל.
Okay. Okay, Sam, you're here or you're also going on Zoom?
I'm here.
You're here. Close the door.
So do you want
Okay.
to drink?
Oh, no, thank you. I'm okay. Okay, let's just put this on speaker's view as I want. This is going to be recorded, so they should be able to see this. Oh, yes, you're back. Hey, you're sitting comfortably with your earphones. That's very nice. Okay. Well, how do we get into speaker's view that I get to see myself? I mean, how does that do? How does this work here? Now I have good old Bloom. Benji, how you doing? How do I
Good.
get? If I'm the speaker, I should be my face should be here, shouldn't it?
That's how it's going to record it.
What?
It'll record it that way.
Okay, to record that way. Okay. Okay, good evening. Okay, we're starting a new sugya. I'd like to get into the I sent you sheets on the KBY Sherman on the shear site. So if you look at them, please, we have a few sheets there and we'll start with that. Let me just get it. This is awkward. We're all on the same campus and using Zoom is not what I planned. Okay, I'm going to take a chumash. And the chumash starts, there's two stories of Avraham having his wife, telling the story that she's his sister and she's wife napped or sister napped or whatever you're going to call it. And then somehow, miraculously, she's returned. And this is the story I'd like to discuss today. It's found in two places. One is in Parshas Bereshis Yud Beis. In your source sheet, that's source Daled. Let's first read that and let's get a little piece of understanding what happened here. It's in Perik Yud Daled, Pasuk Yud Aleph. The pasuk goes as follows. Let me just find for 1 minute. Where is this? No, it's not there. Just 1 minute. Yeah, it should be Perik Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Aleph. Perik Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Aleph. I'm just in the very beginning, and here it goes. Pasuk Yud. Vayira av ba'aretz. Vayered Avram Mitzrayim. There was a famine in the land of Canaan, and Avram went down because obviously Mitzrayim is lower than the mountain, the topography of Canaan. Lagur Sham. Ki kaved harav ba'aretz, as the famine was heavy in the land. Vahin, it came to place Kashehi Kriv. When he came close, Lavo Mitzrayim, to arrive to Mitzrayim. Vayomer el Sarai Ishto, and he said to Sarai his wife, Hinei no yadati, behold, I now know. Ki isha yifat mare'at, that you are a woman of beautiful. What should we say? You are a beautiful woman. Vaya, thus will come to place. Ki yiru otacha mitzrim, when the Egyptians will see you. V'amru, and they will say, Ishtozot, this is his wife. No, obviously, since it's his wife, that's the one you have to take. You can't take it while she has a husband. He will disturb us. V'aguoti, they will simply murder me. V'otachi chayu, and you will be left alive. Imri na, please say achotiyat, that you are my sister. Ultimately, therefore, they will take you, but at least I won't die. Leman yitavli bavulech, the things will be good for me. V'haitan nafshi b'gdalech, and my life will continue living due to you. Now, this is obviously a very interesting parsha, to say the least. For example, Rashi brings a midrash agadah that we all heard in kindergarten on Pasuk Yud Aleph. Hinei no yadati. I think we have it in your sheets. Let me just check that just to make sure. No, we don't have that. So you, I guess you must know this anyway. Hinei no yadati. Behold, please, I know. Midrash Agadah. Rashi brings a Midrash Agadah, which we're aware. If Rashi brings a Midrash Agadah, that means this is a way of understanding Pshat. He's bothered with the problem. Hinei no yadati seems to imply it is now that I know, but he didn't see her before. I mean, they're 70 years old by now. They're married quite a while. He says, Hinei no yadati Midrash Agadah. Adachav, until now, lo hikir bam, he did not recognize her, I would say, that way. Lo hikir, but he didn't recognize in her this function of Yisha Yifat Mare'at. Bitoch tzniut shebishneim, because of the tzniut of both of them, v'achshav, but now he akir ba ayedei maaseh, he recognized it through occurrence what happened. We all know the story. They were, so to speak, at the river. Not sure which river there is between Canaan and Eretz Mitzrayim. There really are no rivers. It must have been during the winter, and there was a creek with water in it, which is what the most of the Nachalim of Eretz Yisrael. There's no river there. I mean, simply I know the country. So, and therefore they were both looking into the river, and each one saw the reflection of the other. So suddenly he sees a reflection. He says, "Wow! I just realized you're a number 10. You're a very, very attractive lady." Obviously, this is as we know, when we look at Midrash Haggadah, we're not expected to take it as historical truth. No one thinks that Chazal had a Masorah Misinai on this. The Ramban himself writes in letters that, we don't always have to accept the Haggadah. Ramban constantly argues with Haggadah as far as Pshat. It's a way of understanding, and I will explain shortly what this is exactly. It's a way of understanding the Dvar Hashem found in the Chumash. I will explain that shortly. Therefore, but we must understand clearly that Chazal saw a certain idea here, and they wanted to give it over in their language. They used Aggadic language. It's just like the Aggadot found in the Shas. Some of them are more than fantastic. They are awkward. I mean, you don't exactly, they don't exactly think that, that someone walked into the eye of a fish for 3 days, or that this Re'im is bigger than Har Tavor the day it's born, etc. These different Aggadas found in Bava Basra and Rav Blachman are naturally not seen as historical fact. They are metaphors, which basically, through which, if you know the culture and the context, you can somehow pierce what they mean. The Gra has a whole kuntras on the Aggadas of Rav Blachman, explaining them in a certain context. The one who knows how to do this is one who has a total command of all the Aggadas and has a total command of the language of Chazal in all the Midrashim period, can understand their symbolisms and their usages of language. The idea that some Aggadah, some person has an agenda that sticks himself into an Aggadah, that's probably weak scholarship. Chaznish has a letter about this, about these people who know Chreis Was, 100 Midrashim, and they give speeches. He says it's very nice to inspire the youth, but it's far from truth. He calls it rachik min aschach tachar v'korv la'efset. Because at the end of the day, you're saying hashkafas u'shnei nabichas hashkafas chazal. You're injecting your agenda into chazal. It's a problem. It's very problematic. That's probably why most of us who try to learn Aggadas will not create our own metaphors. We will go piggyback on those people which knew Kol HaTorah Kula, including the Chalakim of Darash and Soid, the Gra, the Chulu, Beis Midrash. These are people which spent years of their lives mastering the total mass of Kol HaTorah Kula. Nigla and Nister, Pshat, Remez, Rishon, and Sod, they had some kind of a key of understanding Aggadas. Okay, so but Rashi obviously brings this Aggadah. That means he sees this as Aggadah as somehow answering a question. Now, what is the question? Hinanayadate means he became aware of something now. So what do they tell the story? Because of the tznius, he didn't know. Now, what does it mean he didn't know? We have to be very honest about this. The man's married for who knows how long. Was it 50 years? I don't know how long he was married. It's 70 now. Let's say he's married for 50 years. Do you really mean that he didn't notice that his wife was a beautiful lady? What, was she wearing a burqa? Does anybody really think that that's what this is? Is it even possible? Don't we see how Yaakov Avinu obviously recognized beauty in Rachel, and he knows the droopy eyes of Leah, and that's why he fell for Rachel. And it doesn't say there because he fell just for her midos typus. That's not what's pointed out in the Mikra. The Mikra describes an attraction due to external beauty. Now, I do not know what or why, or at least I don't choose to deal with it now, the importance that the Torah gives to the beauty of the feminine. I do see that Yaakov Avinu worked an extra 7 years to get that. The Meister Shehoya, I still remember when I was a bacher. Rebbe Ber, Zichron Levracha, the comments of Rosh Yeshiva, had a Talmud Mubik, which was his prize Talmud. His name was Reb Shlomo Hayman. Was Shiva and Tervadas. Reb Shlomo Hayman, he was his prize student. Even Imam, I think there's a letter he says that the Chevle Leid of his mother were worth it, that he should be able to raise such a student. And he wanted him to take his daughter. So he says, I'm sorry, I don't want to. He says, why not? Because she's not exactly good looking. Obviously, she was, if you know the Leibowitz family, she was the opposite of good looking. She was bad looking. So he says, so Rebbe asked him, who state in Torah? Where does it say in the Torah they have to find a good looking girl? So he says, he answered him, but Yaakov Avinu worked 7 extra years for one. So obviously there's a value to it. Remember, this is the child hearing this. Okay, so you're right, Sheka Chen Behevel Hayafi, but it's good to have it not as an ikka, but as a tafel. Obviously, at least the Chazal thought so. We see Lehedya that the hesped of Avraham Avinu to Sora Imenu is Bas Kuf Kibas Chof and Bas Chof Kibas Zayin. That the beauty that she had at 7 is the beauty she had at 20, and the beauty she had at 20 is the beauty that she had at 100. Obviously, we seem to be saying that the Torah and the Abba celebrated the beauty of the feminine for whatever reason it be. There's a big moral on this. This is not my issue. But if it's something that they celebrate, and he didn't exactly say at her husband that she was a big balas chesed. What's pointed out in the Mikra is the bas kuf kebas chof kebas chuf kechav zayin. 2 things. First of all, she had no chatoim. Second of all, she was beautiful. Those are the 2 the Kudas HaHesped found in Chazal when they explained that bas kuf, the mea ve'esrim v'sheva shana. So it seems to be, for whatever reason it is, that somehow these things work together. Their inner beauty, their inner harmony was expressed also, was in sync with their external harmony, and this was something glorified. So how can you honestly believe they didn't notice it and didn't see that all these years? It doesn't make sense. There's something else that I always wonder about. Do you really think this is the first time he spoke to her? I don't know. When you get married, you'll see you're going to have to compliment your wife 3 times a day minimum. If not, you end up sleeping in the doghouse. So let's be honest. This is the first conversation they had in the Chumash. You know, we're married for 50 years. Nothing happened. They didn't have this. There was no conversations here. We don't have anything about their married life. Were they happy? Were they sad? What do we know about them? Actually, very little. And we know that all of a sudden the Torah chooses to record to us a certain conversation. Obviously, that certain conversation is very important. Otherwise, why is this conversation so important? It means all the other conversations that they had during their married life, which I'm sure they were very interesting, very special, were not important as far as the purpose of the Torah is concerned. I'd like to understand what that is. What is the purpose of the Torah, and what conversations are chosen, what are not chosen? And what does it mean in that light that because of tznius, he didn't notice her as the Isha Yefas Mara, etc.? Well, how could it possibly be as aforementioned? The next pasuk is even more interesting. The pasuk is Va'ayah, this will come to be Ki Yerutach HaMitzrim, with the Egyptians will see Va'amru, they will say Ishtozot Va'agoti. That would be enough. What is he adding? Listen, they'll kill me and you'll be alive. Maybe if they kill us both, I don't mind. But I should be dead and you live. That doesn't make sense. Does that make sense to you? What is the idea of stressing Votachi Chayu? What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? So obviously, and once again, I'm saying this is a recorded conversation. Let's go a little further. Imri na plisa chotiat. Now, what for? So it says here, Laman yitavli ba'avorech. What does Rashi say on that? Yitnuli matanot. It's like a real Galatiana. First of all, you'll lie. I'll make a killing. Second of all, and I will also live. Why do you even mention the fact that you're going to get paid off? Okay, listen, they'll say you're my sister. They'll pay me to allow you to get married because I'm your apotropos. So we'll make a killing out of the deal. We're doing a sting job. You know what I mean? Say to the sister, I'll make the money, then they won't kill me. You'll get taken. What can you do? Sorry, but at least I'll make a killing and I will be living. What's happening here is that should be taibus amamin of it. What does it mean? And that's the primary thing. That's number one on the list, not number two on the list. This does not sound good. That would be an understatement. This does not sound good. Another issue about this is how Avraham Avinu explains himself in Parshas Vayera, and that's found in your source sheet. If you look carefully in source Aleph, it's in Bereshis Chof, Pasuk Yud Gimel, where he explains to Avimelech to ask him, why did you do this? Why did you say that this is your sister? I mean, I almost had a relationship with her. Kimat shochav echad means me. Okay, how could you do this? In Pasuk Yud, he says, what did you do to us? You misled us. What did I sin to you? You brought upon me and upon my kingdom an enormous sin here. We actually snapped your wife. You did things with me things that which are not acceptable. They should not be done. But again, first he came in saying, how could you do this? Then he says, listen, there must be a reason. What did you see that forced you to do this unexplainable or unacceptable thing? What exactly did you did you see? Oh, Zakai's explaining what the sting is. Okay, goodness. What can I do? Okay, so the answer is, what does he answer him? Avraham, and Avraham said, Ki amarti, I said, Raken yirate elokim b'makom hazeh. This is not there's no place of fear of the Lord in this place. V'aguni, and therefore they will kill me, al dvar ishti, because of my wife. See, if there be the fear of the Lord, mela. But if there's no fear of any Lord here, so what's going to happen? They'll kill me. Why do they kill me? Because they're balei taiva. And then he says as follows. Gam omna achoti bat avihi. She's actually somewhat of a sister because she's basically a granddaughter of my father. Achlo batimi, but she's not the daughter of my mother because she's my niece. But the Eli Lisha, and they married her. So we didn't really lie. We just didn't tell the whole truth. Vayhin, it came to place kasher hitu oti elokim. It's a very interesting sentence. Hitu is the Shon Rabin. They misled or they went wayward. Oti elokim, me the Lord. Mi beisavi. What does it mean? Hitu oti elokim mi beisavi. They misled me, Lord, from the house of my father. What does that mean? So if you look at Rashi says, he quotes Unkelus. Kasher itu oti, in Pasuk Yud Gimel. Unkelus tirgaim, Unkelus translated Masha tirgaim. What did Unkelus translate? Well, let's look at it. This is again Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vahava kato amamaya bas oivde yedehon. It's when the nations were misled and followed the Maisi Yadayim, the statues which they created, equals they moved into paganism. Yasi me kariva Hashem the dechaltei. God brought me close to his monotheism, to his fear. Liyiris Hashem. Mi beis Abba. He took me from the house of my father, which was a house of paganism, and he took me close to him. I told her, and because of that situation, I told her, this is the good thing you can do for me, that you can do for me, in every place. That we will arrive there, and Maralai say about me, Achihu. It seems to be that which the incentive for Avraham Avinu for this request is not because there's a bunch of taibas noshim. This is not a rayas. He said the problem is because they're oivdei avodah zarah as opposed to me that I'm a monotheist. Now, this doesn't actually make too much sense. There's a lot of very nice Avodah Zarah, which are not wife snappers. You see, Avimelech said that. Avimelech said, listen, we're Avodah Zarah, but we just don't do things like that. So what does it mean? If he would have told me Taivas Nashim Nakasha, you didn't say Taivas Nashim. You said because of Avodah Zarah. I don't know. I don't think Pope Francis would schap anybody's wife. He's a nice guy. What's the pshat in Unkelus? So Rashi Taka writes on this differently. He says, "Kishayini yotzieni hakadosh baruch hu in beis avi liyos mishotet v'nadni makom lemakom." So the I problem is the lashon rabim is a problem. Kishay hitu equals when I became a nov and nad oti. Who did this to me? God, me beis avi. He took us out of beis avi and made me into a nov and nad. But what's the lashon rabim? So in the next Rashi explains it. Kashay to lashon rabim. The alti tmach he habem mekomot lashon elukus lashon marus kari lashon rabim. Because many times Elokim is called lashon rabim. That's a very interesting language. Asher hochu Elokim Elokim chayim Elokim kedoshim. V'chol lashon Elokim lashon rabim. What does this mean? So I think I once explained this in the name of the Gra and Bira Gra and Shulchan Aruch. In Yeridea, Elokim means kolak pala koiches kulam. It means ashgacha klalis as opposed to kael, which is ashgacha pratis. Elokim, he was the Lord of all multiple energies and issues. Kael is focused on one issue. So that's lashon Elokim. Elokim acheri, Elohim acherim. It's actually one avodah zarah, but they're called lashon rabim because Elohim is lashon rabim. So that's what he says, Kashehitu oti Elokim. It says, if it says when God made me into a nom and nod, mi beis avi, etc. That's what Rashi explains. Unkelus obviously does not explain this, but on Unkelus we have to understand why does he attribute the problem of wife snatching specifically to the Dairis of Avodah Zarah, for which he was redeemed by Kosh Baruch Hu Kirevoto and brought him into monotheism. This also has to be understood. The Maisa, I'm trying to make, there's quite a few issues here. Let's try to do, let's start with something quite simple. And that is, first of all, this is something we did already in the past. Yes, we definitely see, if we look into the Chumash, if you recall the end of Parshas Bereshis, it's quoted in your source is source Hey. Where there we have the story Adam man multiplied and he had daughters. But Yeru Bnei Elohim is Bnei Sa'adam, and the elite, the sons of the leaders of the lords, saw the daughters of the Adam equals the farm girls, the people of the lower stature, Adam Milashan Adama. That they're good. They took for themselves women, or rather spouses, sex partners, I would say, from whatever they chose. And Rashi says on the spot, what does that mean? Look at the next source, Bnei Elohim, Bnei Sorim V'Ashoftim, the elite. Okay, and then it says further, what does it mean? Mikol Asher B'charu. Last line of that source Vav, Abu Lasbal, Afa Zocher, Afa Ba'ema. Basically, they lost all restrictions and they became a self-centered hedonistic society to which the existence of anybody else is a chefza, not a gavra. The fact that you exist is relative to me. You have no unique identity. You're there. Whatever you are is to keep me busy, to keep me company, or to give me pleasure. And if your dog is something I like, I will take it for my sexual encounter. If your child is what I like, I will take that. If you're a boy or a girl. If it's your wife, I will take that. So the Torah itself describes that the within 7 generations of creation from the perfect monotheistic world of Adam and Shais, ultimately you had Dorish Enish, which started with a very profound Avodah Zarah, and it didn't take until the 10th generation, till Noach, that was totally decrepit, and they had gone into the worst self-centered reality, And they totally lost any sense of morals and ethics. I guess the higher you are, the faster you fall. It's actually a frightening thing to think about how this happened. So it's obviously in light of this that he is saying, look, I see here that people steeped into paganism ultimately fell into great self-centered hedonistic lifestyle. It's obviously, this is what the uncle says, they are toyach and toyas of Amamaya, and they're once again living, he sees them as living like people prior to the Mabul. Nothing much has changed. This falls in sync with that which we learned in a whole series before, that the Chatoim of Enosh and Mabul and Dor Palaga, they're all one chait in different variants. And that's what he feels, and that's why, look, we look today at society. Officially, we live in a religious society. Yes, the Senate starts with some kind of a priest or rabbi blessing. Thanksgiving, we all go to say thank you to the Lord. It's quite a religious country, America, you know. Thanksgiving, b'chulu, even Xmas is it's religious. It's interesting to see it, you know what I mean? And you wonder, how can on one hand have such an external religiosity, on the other hand, it's such a moralist country. It is like beyond perversion. It reminds me many times of Rome and its downfall. There are things that you can see without going into particulars in the Western society, in America, Befrat, which put Caligula to shame. You really wonder. And we can talk about it soon, but just to get the idea behind it, so I can understand that obviously the answer is because Western society does not bow itself down to a truth. Religion, of most religions, of man-made religion, are there to save man, to give man good feeling and salvation and a future. Like even Catholicism, the base is you can live a terrible, decrepit life, but if a minute before you die, you don't do tshuva, but you embrace the Savior and want his grace, you will get it, and St. Pete will open up the pearly gates, so you'll get in. If Adolf Hitler would have embraced the grace a minute before he shot himself, he would have been redeemed. There was once a whole dialogue on the internet with young Meir Soloveitchik when he was doing religious and law studies in Yale, pointed this out. He wrote a bunch of articles on this, and just reading it on the internet, I saw that the holy Christian theologians agreed. Yes, he would have embraced the Savior, he would have had grace. In other words, the whole idea of the major focal point of Christianity is the monotheistic religion, which is there to serve you. God will take his embodiment, the Son, and kill him to be the Paschal Lamb in order that humanity will be redeemed from the cardinal sin. And you can do all the various in the world. You just, Mekaba Alecha, it's a chesed of this carbon, and you're in. You don't even need vidu and kapora. It's a bachaya. That's the ikar din. As long as you die with the sacrament, you're in. You don't need vidu and kapora. The confession is very sweet, but you can do without it. I'm trying to say that all these religions are man-centered and there to save man, to make man feel better, feel more comfortable, enlightened if you're a Buddhist, and so on and so forth. There's no subjugation to a truth. You don't bow down to somebody and say, okay, batel daitcho b'fnei da'atoi. Our God is different. Our God is, he's not just a nice guy. Our God demands subjugation. He says, Malkeinu, Avin, Malkeinu. He says, Avadim. I want Avadim. He's a melech and he wants an am of Avadim. That's what he wants. Thus, this religion is something which forces you to subjugate yourself to his truths. Judaism, without its laws, without its restrictions, is not the language. That's the religion. The religion is these restrictions. The religion is a certain prescribed lifestyle that the Kadosh Baruch Hu feels is appropriate in order to bring the world to a certain purpose. That whole reality does not exist in most of the Western religions I know about, and Eastern, actually. In other words, in other religions, it's correct to ask, is there relevancy anymore to discuss the nativity or the passion of Christ? In Judaism, there's no meaning to ask what's the relevancy of learning Torah in the mitzvah. It doesn't have to be relevant to you. It's relevant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you do it because that's Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that facilitates his Ratzon and the reason why he created this world. Mamela, what happens here is that once you became a pagan, you walked away from the Malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you took Avodah Zarah, which you were more comfortable with. We discussed at length in the past why they did it and what they did. You basically cut down a God to size which would fit your palate, ultimately allowing you to feel comfortable with what you're doing and not demanding restrictions. You basically put God and cut him down to size, very similar to many Jewish communities today. They took Shulchan Aruch, they cut it down and pasted it. They took away this, they took away that. And they're still called Orthodox. Why not? You're open Orthodox, you're closed Orthodox, there's so many different types of Orthodox that I lost count already. I don't know, the word Orthodox makes no sense to me. Halachic. I understand that when halacha, there are multiple and there's so many different interpretations, granted, but halacha, as much as they are a halachic Jew, that's what we're talking about. That's Yiddishkeit. That's the Knisa Labris that I discussed when we were here on a Friday night. The Knisa Labris of Nasiv and Nishma is the imperative. That defines us as a religion. There we understand that one thing that God does is the honor of man, not the Adam Nivri Yechidi, that man is unique and every person has a purpose. Ultimately, therefore, he's not there because to make you happy, he's there for the reason of God. And if God had deemed that he should live with a certain lady, that facilitates his shleimus and her shleimus in order for the world to turn its shleimus to follow the cheshbon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The world religion is not there to make you a better person. It can make you a better person, but the goal is if you'll be a better person, the world will be better. This will bring God to his agenda. We are not the agenda. We are pawns and rooks on the board. The player is called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, we don't ask too many questions and we accept, and that's obviously we're restricted. And since there were, so to speak, there were Sheva Arayas for Bnei Noach at the time. And as the Rishonim say, Eish is included for Ben Noach without going into the whys and the whats. It's for Davik Be'ishtai V'lei Be'eshes Chaverai. That's what the Gemara says in Sanhedrin. So this was an erva. And this was Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They all had learned and they all had known, as we taught in the past, that Noach already taught that he was commanded by God to teach this value to humanity. But that lasted as long as you believed in the centrality of Beirei Olam and you subjugated to him. So ultimately you were subjugated to his values. As soon as people walked away once again from Noach's teachings of monotheism, it didn't take long. They were all going back to Maseim Shoyu Koidman, which is like the Dora Maba Avodah Zorah, to the extent that by the time Dora Palaga came, there was no one which was Oved HaKadosh Baruch Hu except for Avraham Avinu, as the Rambam writes in Hilchos Avodah Zorah. All humanity had turned their back on the message of Noach. This is unbelievable. Well, once you don't have a relationship with that God, and you don't think about him, and you don't even care about him, and from a male, his values don't mean anything to you. If his values don't mean anything to you, so why shouldn't I objectify other people or others, women or assets or whatever it only be? Why shouldn't I find a girl as hot, a number 10? You know what I mean? Why shouldn't I look at women and salivate? They are nothing more than animals which are there to nurture my and satiate my hormonal desires. So obviously that's what Avraham Avinu is saying, that humanity has become depraved. It's walked away from the morals and ethics of the Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, which are the morals and ethics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I say moral and ethics because, as you recall, I already taught there were no tzivuyim until Moshe Rabbeinu. There was a tzivuy of Noach to teach these values, God's values to the world. Okay, but once God is not there for me, why would I care about his morals and his ethics? You can look at it carefully. I'm sure there must be morality in Christianity, yet somehow the same guy that goes to church and celebrates Thanksgiving, believe me, he doesn't live by those morals and those ethics. I don't think that today we can say Roy Be'ilois Eitzel Abal in most societies, the open modern societies of America and Europe. I'm not sure we can say that Rav Bila said Sa'abal, and therefore we know exactly who's the father of what anymore. I highly doubt that such a chazaka exists, knowing the situation of the world around me. Okay, this is a terrible truth, but that's what it is. That is number one. So we have to understand that. We also have to understand what Mitzrayim was. And here's something very special. As we know, the pasuk says on Mitzrayim, it's a pasuk, it's in your sources over here actually. Let me show it to you. If you bring it. Yes, there's a pasuk in source Yud Aleph, which says, "V'atagevna al pilagshayim asher b'sar chamorim b'saram v'zirmas susim zirmasam." It's a pasuk in Yechezkel describing Mitzrayim. They basically had sexual encounters with their concubines, their flesh, the flesh of donkeys, and their seed is the seed of horses. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's an interesting taisvus to see, and that is found in source Yud. It's a taisvus Ksubas Gimel Omer Beis. I'll tell you what it says. The chleik is there, taisvus and Rivah. Rabbeinu Tam's shita is that if a Eishes Ish has an affair with a non-Jew, and afterwards the non-Jew converts, and she obviously divorces, she happens to become an almana, divorces her husband, the din is she can marry him. Although the halacha is, we know the Gemara says in Saita and Yavamis and Ksubas, that a site is also labal and also labayel. But to this bayel, she's mutter. Some Rishonim learn Rabbi Tam, she's also not usher to her husband. Why not? Because that's not called the bia v'neishes ish. Why? Because psar chamarim b'soram. Look at the taisvus. Source Yud in the last 2 to 3 lines. But here Rabbi Tam dein chayavim misa al bilas mitzri. The Rachmana Afkere Lazaroi, the Torah made the Zera Hefker. The Chsiva, the Pasuk says, V'zir Mesusim Zir Masma. I never knew this Hefker Bezin Hefker on semen. What does Taisus mean? Rachmana Afkere Lazaroi. What does it got to do Hefker of their semen to the fact that he's not answering in Eishes Ish? This is one of these Peladik Taisus that the lack of understanding of this is so large, it's beyond contempt. The Pshat is Pashit. Anybody who learns Ramban al Torah understands this. Ramban writes on the pasuk of Les Eishes Amitcha Loititin Shchoftecha Lazora. You shouldn't have a laying of seed together with your friend's, your fellow man's wife. So to Ramban, I don't understand. The halacha is that we're makani even. What happens if boil be'aver mace? He didn't have an erection, but he inserted himself into her. He's also chayiv misa. And that's a beer which ain't a royal azriya. It's a beer which practically cannot create seed without an erection. There can't be azra. You can't have children. So he says the time of the code, we understand there's a difference between pshuta and shemikra, as we taught this many times in class, and what the final halacha is. Pshuta shemikra is that the only bia which usher on Eishes Ish is a bia which is yachal hazriya. Eishes amitcha loitin shchapta chalazora. What happened through Torah Shabbal Peh, and that developed even with an Aver mace, that's another story to talk about. But as the Gra writes in the Yo in Parashat Mishpatim, we always have to understand the Pshuta Shemikra, because that's the Hagdara of the halacha. Even if the halacha practically changes in other Siyurim, that is something else. He discusses this. This is not the place to talk about that today. But that's a Gra in the beginning of Parashat Mishpatim in Aderes Eliyahu, which describes the relationship between Pshat and Drash. Very important to remember. He writes, you must always understand the Pshat before you go into the Drash, because that is the real Amita Shotayra. This will give you the Tzura and the Agdor of the halacha. Example would be when the pasuk says Ayin Tachas Ayin, Shein Tachas Shein. We know Miaz Moshe Rabbeinu that you pay money. So why did the Torah write Ayin Tachas Ayin? Because the Pshuta Shemikra is you take out an eye for an eye. What's the nafkamina? The money you're paying is not retribution. It's basically you pay the money. If not, we will take out your eye. It's because of that the Rambam paskins halacha that although Haidoyas Baldin you can admit and commit yourself to any money you want, but if you're maidan chavala b'chavercha, you're maidan, you plucked out someone's eye, you're not chayav kesef. Because only through Adim can we ascertain that you did something which in Etzin and Pshuta Shemika, you should have got your eye plugged out. Now that we know that you should have got your eye plugged out, so we're immediately taken out, so now you pay money. It's not a chayvis mama, it's a chayvis ayin. And for a chayvis ayin, there's no din of a does baldin. That's a Rambam and Hilchos Chayvul Mazik. What we're trying to say is that what is Pshuta Shel Mikra? The Pshuta Shel Mikra is that what? That Eish Mitra Tidin Shchoptecha Lazora means Kipshuta. We don't want a mix-up of the Zera. The idea behind Eishis Ish is we don't want a mix-up of genealogy. We need everybody to know who his father is and who his mother is. And if we'll have free sexual encounters, no one will know who their father is. Why is it important to know who your father is? So this is a Ramban found in your sources if you have them in front of you. Very important Ramban. Ramban writes in source Yud Beis. In the first paragraph, Kabedis Avicha, honor your father, Zot Ramban, Hinei Yishlim Kol Ma Shenu Chayavim B'divrei Aber Ba'atzim B'chvaydai. The first 5 dibros is everything we need to know about the essential essence of God and His honor, Shabbos, etc., whatever is there. Now we're going to talk about how we react to the people around us. Started first talking about your father. Why? Sheula told Daisa, the father to his children, he's also like a creator. Because he's part of, he's a shutuf to Kadosh Baruch Hu in your creation. Ki Hashem Avinu Harishon, God is our primary father, equals he's our source. Va'amolid Avinu Acharon, and he who begets me, who is seed developed into my mother's womb and became me, he's called my other father. L'chein Amru b'Mishnah Torah, that's why it says in Sefer Dvarim, Kasher Tzivicha. The Gemara says in Yavam, the covet of father and mother is equal to the covet of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Why? So the Ramban explains. The idea of honoring a father and a mother is an idea of internalizing into yourselves what we call source awareness. You have to remember what your source is. It's like you learn anything, you do anything. You do mitzvahs, you do whatever you do, you always have to ask why and what's it from. Source awareness. To internalize primary source awareness allows you to finally constantly look at the primary source, well, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then, I say, that is the product of source awareness. A primary tool of source awareness is honoring your parents. I see them as my source, and that's why I honor them. They are the source of my existence. The chinuch takes it to something a bit more, touchy-feely, hakara satoif. That's very sweet, but that's not the Ramban. Ramban simply said that you're mechabed them because they're your source. And since you're mechabed them, ultimately you'll be mechabed your primary source. He then continues and says something unbelievable. And he says, that is the reason for Leisignai found in the Chumash. Leisignai found in the Aseret Dibros is not to steal money. You must know that. Leisignai of the Chumash is to kidnap and sell somebody. And that's found in the Aseret Dibros. Why is that found in the Aseret Dibros? And the answer is up to Ramban. When you kidnap somebody and you sell him, you take away from the basic tool of source awareness because he will never know who his father was. You take away from a basic elementary tool that everybody has of source awareness. You took it away from him. That's the tragedy of a Gain of Nefesh Mechoroi. That's the idea of Kibbut Avayim. God wants us to live with the tools of source awareness because that's what we're supposed to be doing. We must live with source awareness. We must oversee ourselves as a derivative of a primary source, which is the Kadosh Baruch Hu, as we taught the Lashon Ramban and the word Yud Kei Vav Kei, Hoive Kadmain, the essential, absolute existence, Hashemimenu Hakol, that He is the source of everything, because of His will and because of His capabilities, omnipotence. Yud Kei Vav Kei means the source of all, ultimate source, what he calls here Avinu HaRishon. You should be mechaven this when you say Kriyat Shema, and understand what you're thinking about. So you understand the importance that the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives to the fact that we must always remember our sources in order to remember Avinu HaRishon. So then ultimately, if people would not have governed sexual encounters, no one would know who their father is. We would lose the major tool of source awareness. And that's what the Raman says, the Iker Tam of Isser Eshes Ish is because of that. There won't be an Avicha. You won't know. Then you lose a tool of Avicha Rishon. Society must have Mishpachaysim Lebeis Avaisam because that's a society which is capable of looking straight all the way to the primary source, which is called the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's why the pasuk says Le'eshes Amitcha Le'siten Shchavtecha Lezora. That's the Ramban. The Satmar Rebbe Zechron Levacha took this very far, and he believed that because of that, a child born by artificial insemination, which we don't know who the father is also a mamzer. Well, that's against Rishonim and Gemaras. I'm not going there. I'm not going into the teaching politics today. But at the end of the day, the basic idea of this Ramban is clear that that's the Yisoid of the Yisr of Eshes Ish. And the Yisoid of Umal, Umal, Babayla, the Yisr of Saita is because she was transgressed the covenant with her husband. What is that covenant? That me and you are a source of a family. But as soon as I am free with other people, there's no more relationship of me and you creating a family. I'm doing my thing, you're doing your thing. Genealogy is essentially a part of the essential idea of a marriage and the Isser of a Seisish. If your bia is a bia which will mix up genealogy, you're messing up genealogy, you're messing up source awareness. That's the Isser of a Saita to a Bayo. This is all true by people who their sexual encounter is an idea, I am having children. People live with a children reality, you know? There are societies which used to be, and by Jews it's still that way, that they're obsessed with children. They need children, they want children. You know how many people do what it takes to have children? A religious family, let's be honest, unless you're playing games with the world, in normal biological reality, 6 to 10 children would be a normal phenomenon. Anything less means that someone's intervened, so to speak, with the natural course of events. Whether halachically permissible or not is not my issue at the moment. That's not what I want. But at the end of the day, natural occurrence, if you're living like a normal person, come on, that's halal. And yet somehow the average family in America is what? It's 1.5 children and 3.2 dogs, you know? And I told you guys once, I had this kid in Cambria Avenue, which was crying in my office. I used to have an office over here down this hall, okay? He says, you know, Rabbi, I'm the 0.5 kid. My dad didn't really want, my mom didn't really want me. What can you do? I'm an accident. It took years to help that kid get back to a normal world. Believe me, years. When that's the reality, we're looking, what society does celebrate children? A society which lives with an ideal which constantly must celebrate the past, bring it in the future vis-a-vis the present. It's a society which says you must always ask granddaddy what happened and know how to live today. It's a society which is obsessed with memory because they understand that history did not start on your birthday, it started a long time ago. And there's a unifying factor of a world created for a purpose which started X amount of years ago. I'm part of the chain and this will go further. That's a society which glorifies children. That's a society which sanctifies the firstborn. For the firstborn has transformed the father from just being a person into becoming the producer of the future. I remember at the Shalom Zachar, my firstborn, he was born like 5.5 years after we got married. So some idiot asked me, what do you feel? So he says, oh, come on, why do you ask me private questions in public? So I remember he was a nice guy, but wasn't bright. So I told him, listen, I wouldn't actually answer you, but now I feel that I want to. You see that little red, ugly kid found in the back room? They're all ugly when they get born. I want to know, you know the truth. Okay, it looks like a monkey. Well, I want to tell you what that is. Until now, I was Sir Laurence Olivier on the stage. I was Hamlet. I was the great player. Now, that little monkey is on the stage, and he kicked me off the stage. Now I'm the producer. I don't know if he'll let me write the script, and I'm hoping he'll let me be his director. But in the meantime, I've been kicked off from being major player. Now I'm producer. Until now, I was the end of the chain. Now the beginning, the reason for the next part of the chain. And it's a tremendous reality. That's why we glorify a Bechor. The Maral says the Bechor transformed you from just being a person to be a father. You are now the reason of a new reality. That's why he gets Pishnayim. First of all, he's a kid. Second of all, he made you into a father. There's a unique kedusha of Bechor. You know what it is? The kedusha of historical continuity. It's the kedusha of genealogy. Father, son, generations. It's the kedusha of flow of history and of tradition which goes through that chain. It's the kedusha of memory. Memory is something, what is memory? Memory is looking into the past and through your mental images, bring it into the present, which ultimately leads to the next stage, which is called the future. Jews are children obsessed and memory obsessed because they are people which live with history, and they always say tomorrow will be better, and we always look back to know where we came from. We are source oriented, and we ultimately with that go to ultimate redemption oriented. There are two poles in our lives: where we came from and how it's ultimately going to be great. And it's the power of memory which connects between where we came from and where we're going to be. The kedusha of that zikaron is the kedusha of those children. The children are the vehicle which bring the past from the past to the future, and that is the dairis that we're talking about. The Gemara says that the galus in the Brisbane Psalm is written in Shanim, Arbama Shana. The Gula is said Dorevi Yeshuvu Eina. The Gula is not totally in Shanim, the Gula is totally in Doiros. To what extent will man, with his children and grandchildren, etc., do what it takes to bring the world to a situation, there will be a redemption. Man has to have, he and his children have to carry the weight and bring the world to where it's supposed to be. This is the uniqueness of source identity and future orientation equals redemption. It's called we are pawns trying to bring the world to where God wants it to be. That's the name of the game. That's the kedusha of children. That's the importance of genealogy. And that is the Isser of Eishesish. Zotra Benutam, a goy's bia, they don't live that way. They don't live with memory orientation. Egypt specifically was heavily hedonistic. They were like horses. You saw a lady, you had sex. The Rashi says in Makkah's Bechairos that, you're supposed to have first born of a father. Now, all of a sudden, you had like 6 kids dying in the house. But there's only one husband. Where are the other 5 from? Rashi says, Mitzvah is Mizanis are you. It was normal. Adultery was not out of the norm. That was the norm. Similarly, very similar to today's America and Europe. In a non-serious, restricted society, oh, you're kidding? Office sex is common as it goes. I have students who tell me horror stories of their summer jobs. It's mamash a horror story. If you're not part of the party, they think there's something wrong with you. Are you gay? Then they'll offer you a guy. You know, that's the way it works today. So I have a student which quit a major job because he was getting an ulcer from the pressures of the office culture of mingling. It was horrendous. He started wearing big tzitzis and made payas and grew a beard just to protect himself. They figure, okay, he's a holy man, don't go near him. You know what I mean? Today it's worse than worse. I don't want to go into. I can tell you horror stories galore from years of people calling me up in terrible situations. What happened to them in their summer jobs, especially young guys. Young, good-looking guy, you know, and he's working late in the office. The guy gets accosted by the lady next to him. This is no joke. We're looking in a society which was totally hedonistic, and that's a society which doesn't care about drowning children. And that's a society which doesn't care about, at least metaphorically, sticking children into walls. The same society today which says there's no problem of aborting a fetus. Because my body is mine. What do you mean your body is? Your body is part of history. Your body is to bring the next generation. It's not just yours. Your body is yours is an idea which is totally self-centered and not understanding what the idea of generations and genealogy is. You live without memory. You live without future. That's the family which has the average family, 1.5 children, 1 kid you meant only, and the other one was a mistake, an oops kid. A child is nothing more than the price you pay for what? For a few moments of pleasure. When you forgot to take the pill or the prophylactic was defective. That's what happens. This is a society we know very closely. I know it very intimately. I see it. I used to live on the west side for like a month and a half, a year. I used to see what's happening in the restaurants, etc. I don't know, let me tell you, it's pretty bad. Don't want to talk about Orthodox societies. I'll let that go for the evening. The overall society, for goodness sakes. I was going with my wife 2 summers ago, I thought in Nordstrom's. And I see this advertisement for women's jeans. And it says, what did it say? Show off your assets. I turned to my wife to say, assets? What, are you going to show off your real estate in my stock portfolio? Then I thought, you wear these tight jeans, so the 2 backside cheeks are called your assets. And they ask you to present your assets to society. What is that thing? Is objectifying a woman, not looking at her as something aesthetic, but rather looking at her as something which is an object. You're a number 10, you're a number whatever it be. You're, as we said, Toivo says, she's hot, she's good. That's not beauty, that's attractive. There's a far cry between beauty and attractive. Beauty means a proportionate, harmonious merging of different elements in a harmonious way. Attractive means that which allows people to salivate and have hormonal reactions. Attractive is that which makes young people like you, when you're in back of a certain a nubile female, your eyes will go south for whatever reason you want to focus on a certain part of her muscular reality. That's not beauty. That's you're not enjoying the aesthetics. You're focusing totally on a hormonal reaction, which is there, which attracts you. You're like sheets, fly paper, and you're a fly. There's other stuff that attracts flies. I don't want to say what it is. Okay, it's called excrement. Okay, well, she's fly paper and you're a fly. That's all it is. And this is what happens here. Avraham Avinu comes close to Egypt, and he realizes the society he's going into. Says, God Almighty, I've known you for 50 years, Sarah. You were always a beautiful person. I spoke to you constantly, and I always complimented you because I know you want compliments. All women want compliments, and I told you. And you know what? It's not just that. I always glorified your beauty. But you know what beauty I glorified? Let me tell you. I said when you were 100, you're like 20. And when you were like 20, you were like 7. Tell me, does anybody think that a 7-year-old girl is attractive? What do they say? The beauty she had at 7, she also had at 20, and they continued into 100. Beauty at 7? What are you, like, not doing well? And the answer is yes. As far as harmonious merging of elements, as tautness of skin, of eyes, of color, that's at 7 too. She just lacks certain things which make her attractive. So the beauty of 7 stayed also at 20. She was not transformed into attractive. She was beautiful. And that beauty continued until her death at the age of 127. That's that husband is saying she was not attractive, she was beautiful. No one's going to say a 7-year-old is attractive unless you should go to jail if you do. This is the husband, yes. You think Yaakov Avinu, the 80-year-old man, was into attractive? He was a Kaddish and a Navi. But he understood a value of a harmonious merging of elements. There's a certain value of beauty. What is it specifically by the feminine? We have some other time. Maybe I'll do a course on Shidduchim one day and we'll discuss it. But at the end of the day, that's not attraction. It's something totally different. Because they lived in a tzniusdik fashion. The whole halachas of tznius is to do one thing. It's not to make the lady ugly. It's to keep her beauty without being attractive. That's why there's certain garden which are usher to levush. It's called levusha prutzais. Why can't she wear levusha prutzais? Because it's rishonim. Clothes which usually are worn by people who want to express their attractivity. Now, if you're honest in your religion, you look, if you wear a certain style, is this to focus on you being attractive, or is it to make or to glorify your aesthetic beauty? A far cry. I remember that once I taught in Ramaz one morning. I had students in Ramaz teaching. They asked me to do a class. I come into the classroom, you have these 16-year-old kids. So there's the guys and the girls. We're talking Upper East Side. Now, what does a 16-year-old acne braced teenage guy look like? He's an idiot, wearing his dockers, saying the wrong things. He's like clumsy, goofs around, tells everybody about the escapades which he never had. This is the typical idiot on one side of the room. On the other side of the room, a 16-year-old girl on the Upper East Side, she's looking for a 20-year-old guy to have fun with. And they were all dressed to kill as if it was a Saturday night. Caked up and painted up. Well, yes, I remember once I said, to get close to you, at first I have to make a bracha berman and mezainis. You know what I mean? You're not going to see. So the topic of the class was, why is it that young ladies in Ramaz, in the Upper East Side, get so dressed up on a typical Tuesday as if it's Saturday night to impress the acne idiot with doctors sitting next to them? That was the topic for an hour. I had a standing ovation. Okay, they asked me sometimes to go back, but it's a reality. It's something to see and understand what this is, what this reflects as far as society is concerned. They did not get caked up and pasted up to be beautiful. Forget. If they would have had their nice nubile simplicity, they would have been beautiful little children. They wanted to look attractive. And I was laughing. You want to be attracted to these geeks? These idiots with the braces and the acne? Guys, they're the wrong people. What are you doing? Okay. It was no, because they understand that being attractive is being beautiful. The world has messed them up so bad that they think that in order to be beautiful, I have to dress in a certain way to expose or to accentuate certain parts of my anatomy in order to be beautiful. They don't understand, no, that's in order to objectify you and to become attractive. You become flypaper. That's all you are. The world becomes so stupid that they don't understand that. And that's the halacha levusha prutzos. It can be covered from head to toe, but if it accentuates and underlines certain things which causes attraction, that is the issue of tznius. That's the din of tznius. That's why you can't, during times of Chazal, red was a color worn by not moral ladies. So the Gemara says that when Amar saw a lady wearing red, he tore her clothes off. Very simple. That's levusha prutzos. Now you figure out how it applies in today's world. I'd be surprised how many things we shouldn't be having in our family closets. But that's the get of the halacha. We try to preserve the beauty and to walk away from being attractive. We try to become a gavra and not a chefza. That's what Rashi says. They never looked at each other as attractive. They only looked at each other as beautiful. Suddenly he gets close to Egypt and realizes, brother, we're about to go into society which has another language. I now have to see you how the locals will see you. You actually, in their eyes, will be attractive. That's dangerous. No one wife snaps a beautiful lady. You take her if you salivate, if she attracts you and she's good flypaper. That's the pshat in this medrash. The medrash is saying, he didn't know that she was also attractive. I never spoke that language. You see how the Avos HaKadoshim spoke, you can fall apart. It says over there in Parshas Vayetze, it said that Yaakov says to Lavan, Haveli ishti va'avay eleha. Now, can you imagine me saying that to my father-in-law? Haveli, give me my woman. I want to have a sexual encounter. Sounds like a caveman. Come here, woman. You know what I mean? Haveli ishti va'avay eleha. And Rashi asked the question, Kal shebekalim, a low life. Low doesn't talk this way. And the answer is yes. If you understand avay eleh as just a sexual encounter to satiate your carnal desires, it is quite not proper to speak that way to anybody, definitely not to your father-in-law. If my son-in-law would talk that to me, I would club him. But no, Yaakov Avinu lived on another planet. For him, avay eleh means I now have to create history, the next generation of Shvatim. He doesn't think in terms of taivas, he thinks in terms of history. He thinks in terms, I must create children because I need the Klal Yisrael to go further in the future. The next Shane. Please give me my lulav to shake it. Give me my shofar to blow it. Give me my lady that I should have children. I was very impressed that Lavan understood him and therefore didn't smack him in the face, which gives a lot of credit to Lavan that understood the language of his son-in-law. Very impressive. I'm just trying to say, yes, and this is the person which worked an extra 7 years for a beautiful woman, not for an attractive woman. His language is not the language of taivas. His language, the language is, I need children. I am not a Mitzri. It's not psar, chamarim, besarim, vazir, masusim, zirmasam. Horses get together for pleasure alone. There's no sense of genealogy. God knows who the father of this horse is. Well, today, if you're in Kentucky, you want to know, because nafkaminas for his yichus, if it'll be a good, it'll be a good racehorse. Okay? But without the business horses, they party. Does anybody know who the father of anything is there? There's no restrictions. It all works with animal instinct. That's the Yesod HaDvarim. That's why he says that wow, this is the society we're going into. And I present this because it's very important to understand what the Torah is teaching us. You see, you have to look at the Chumash and ask yourself a serious question. What kind of book is this book? Is this a history book with laws? Definitely not. Because the basic idea of a history book, first and foremost, it will have sequence. And if there's a book which has no historical sequence, it's the Chumash, Ein Mukdamu Mu'achar BaTorah. Even the Ramban, which tries to constantly push into sequence, agrees that there are things which are not sequential. A typical example would be the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha. The Bris Ben Absorim happened long before God told Lech Lecha. It also happened long before the Meleches HaMelachim, if you really want to know. Look at your Seder Olam and you'll see. What is the Seder of the Mikra? You think God lost his sheets? Just put it wherever you want. We'll figure out later what he's a lousy writer. That's obviously not what it means. There is an order, and I want to explain what the order is. The Ramban discusses at length. See if you have it here. I don't know if it's there. There's only one sheet he sent, I see. Okay, so I'll tell you about what he writes. Ramban writes in the Hagdama to Bereshis that the Chumash carries within the total dialogue of God to man. And not every generation has the key to see it, and every generation has different keys to see God's message to it in the Chumash. Even the prophecies. Yechezkel, where did he see the Ma'aseh Merkava from the Chumash? I don't understand. Yirmiyahu preceded him and didn't see it. Correct. Because God wanted to be revealed at a certain point of time and gave the keys of seeing it in the Chumash then. The Ramban says the Sikh is the Kolim v'Oifais. The Shlomo Melech knew. He knew it from the Chumash. I hate to say it. Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't know if he knew it. Shlomo did. I don't know if Eliyahu Navi knew it. Shlomo did. Every generation has his person, which is going to reveal whatever is needed of God's dialogue with man from the Chumash. The Gemara says in Shabbos Kuf Ches, the words Anoichi are a notrikon. They're an abbreviation of 4 words in Aramaic. Anoichi, Ano, I, Nafshi, myself. Chaf is kasaft, I wrote myself. Yahivt, and I gave myself to you. I wrote myself in a book and I gave myself to you. The Chumash is the dialogue of God to man. It's everything God wants man to know through the generations. You should really read the Agdama, the Ramban al Torah, which explains this. Now you have to understand, you know what the Chumash is? It's not history. There's no sequence. It's not literature because the characters are totally not fleshed out. You know nothing, but if you wouldn't have Torah Sheba'al Peh, you would know nothing about Avraham Avinu prior to 70 years old. You would know nothing about anything before. Even today, what do you know about Moshe Rabbeinu from the age of 13 when he his first bar mitzvah, he went out and killed somebody? Can you imagine on your bar mitzvah walking out and killing somebody? Well, Moshe Rabbeinu, he became an ish, he went out and he murdered an Egyptian. That was his bar mitzvah party. And then he ran away. The next time we meet him, he's 80 years old. Hello, what did he do for 57 freaking years? And no one really knows. There's some kind of odd Sefer HaYashar, which the Ramban himself says is a dubious book, which can't be trusted, and tells the stories that he was a king and where and Cush and this and that. That's all mythology. That's together with Zeus and Jupiter is about as true as that. Ramban says it's not a book that you can verify that it's telling the truth. It's called Sefer HaYashar. Whatever it's a whole book with a legend, so to speak. An old man was found in the walls of Jerusalem by a Roman soldier, and he was writing the book. We don't know about the old man. We don't know about the soldier. Whatever it is, it was a bestseller and became popular. The Ramban writes in that, Im namin l'sefer HaYashar as kach v'kach v'kach. It's a nice way of saying it's not credible. He's a nice man, the Ramban. So we mamish have no clue what happened to Moshe from the age of 13 to the age of 80. Isn't that important? I told you, we also know no clue of what do you know about the marriage between Avraham and Sarah? Nothing. You know, he gave her one compliment. It's the only conversation which was important. And then afterwards, when we have, she tells him, get rid of here, take my servant, get rid of her. You know, that's all we have. Know anything about her. And people start analyzing the relationship of Yitzchak and Rivka. It's so funny. I saw these papers and analyzing. What do you know about them? One encounter, that's it. And for that, you make a whole Megillus Rus. Since when do you analyze two people's lives because you have one episode in it? Is there a couple which all their episodes are only beautiful? It is pathetic to have a psychoanalysis of people because of a sparse little piece of information. It's actually quite stupid. I find it demeaning for people to do this. But it's done. It's full of literature on it. Well, then it's not really literature because the characters are totally not fleshed out. It's not history because it simply isn't. There's no sequence. What is the Bible? The answer is, if you know your lit, it's a compilation of short stories. Not imaginative short stories. You take snippets of history, but not to have a history book, but to make short stories out of those snippets. And what's the purpose of a short story? Does anybody go to school here? Short story, the characters are not important. They're nothing more than a medium to tell you a message. The Gifts of the Magi, I don't know what, Guy de Maupassant, or O. Henry, I don't know who you've read, of the great short story writers. They're like half-page stories sometimes. It's a situation where he puts you into a mood and gets an idea across. That's all it is. You don't know anything what happened before, you don't know anything that happened later. You got a story. That's what the Chumash is. It's the author called God having a lot of messages that he wants to teach you, and he does it through compiling short snippets of history, which he writes in a literary form. Thus, you don't really know anything about the historical characters. The people you know are literary characters. It's because of that, we don't know whether it was a Melech Chodesh or Melech Yashin that died after Yosef. The machlekes of Rav and Shmuel there is not whether historically it was this or that. The question is the literary character as based on the Chumash. From the words of the Chumash, do we understand it was a Melech Chodesh or Melech Chodesh B'tzei? No one is using historical proof to anything. They bring rayas on how to read the Chumash. Equals, we're not arguing in history, we're arguing what does the book mean when it calls him a Chodesh. Who is the literary? You know nothing about Avraham Avinu, the person. All you know is the literary character that God uses. It tells us this is true history, and through him, I want to tell you stories and messages. I want you to understand that's a big issue, and that's why Ein Mukdam U'Muchar B'Torah, because this is not sequential. This is not a novel. This is not history. The agenda of a compilation of short stories, which is based on history, is basically because I have messages, and there's an order of how I want to present my messages. What are the messages of God? If I be a Navi, maybe I know a bit more. But it's very clear that's what it is according to the Ramban. The order lies in the way God wants to present his messages. This has nothing to do with history, nothing to do with literature. I tell you, it's a compilation of short stories based on historical fact. That's why we accept the facts in the Torah, which we accept as fact. But their purpose here is to tell us a message through the fact. That is why every conversation, if there's only conversation recorded is this, because this wants to tell you and me something that we have to know. Well, there's definitely something we just learned, the idea that we should be living with beauty and not with attraction is a very important conversation. And the message God wants to give us at this time in the book is that. And there's another message here, which is very important. Just in light of this, you can begin to understand why the Gra writes that Torah lies in Pshat and Remez and Drush and Sod. And he who knows the emes of Torah will see how the Pshat is expressed, how the Sod is expressed in the Drash and the Drash and the Remez, and ultimately in the Pshat. And if they all four dimensions are not synchronized, that means something's off and wrong. If you say a Pshat in a Chumash or in a Gemara, and that doesn't fit with the Sod Dover or the Remez Dover, that means it's not the emes. The true emes of Torah can only be found by the person which knows the Pshat, the Remez, the Drush, and the Sod, thus knowing the variant different remazim and messages given in this piece of Torah, then he understands how one is another expression of the other. That's a Gra found in the Pasa Shulchan, the Talmud of the Gra in the Agdama. That's why when people tell me, don't tell me this side, what's the Pshat? I said, my dear friend, sometimes there's things with the message is found inside and we don't understand the message in Pshat. No one until today knows why God wrote a list of the kings of Esav at the end of Vayishlach. Those who know Sod understand what they rewrote upon it. That's a very clear and understandable thing, which I will not explain here. So at the level of Pshat, no one knows. I have to see something there which no one knows why. But the level of Remez and Sod, whoa, that's probably one of the most important parts of the Torah. Would you believe it? Upilak show shmaru uma, woo! You know, you come to me after you're 40 and I'll teach it to you. Okay? So if you remember that I was alive. Okay, but at the end of the day, yeah, that's how this works. One has to understand these things. One understand the Torah is very complex. And there's Pshat and there's Remesh and Drush and there's Sod. So there's an unbelievable Zohar Kaddish, which tells us the side of this imino achoisiyat l'man yitavli bavur v'choisa nafshi b'glalech. It's late, so I'm going to do it orally. I'm just going to say one thing. Let's understand carefully. First of all, the Zohar says that when Avraham Avinu went down to Egypt, what he was doing was trying to do the same thing that Adam did when he encountered the serpent. And Adam hoped that he would somehow balance between, let's just use the idea of subjective thought and objective thought, whatever that means. I taught in the previous class, between emes and sheker, ra and taiv, based on a Rambam Amar and Nevuchim. And he would balance that and therefore create a richer world. He failed. And he brought death to the world. The Zohar writes the second person that tried that was Noach. After Noach got out of the ark, and he was like the new first man. He also wanted to rectify the Chet Eitz Hadas, and that's why he took with him kerem, he took with him a grapevine and planted it. Because Chazal saying, the Zohar said that the Eitz Hadas was Geffen, Machlaikis, Chita or Geffen or Rimain. It definitely wasn't an apple. Okay? Geffen, and he wanted to have the Geffen, and somehow through the subjective feeling of experiencing pleasure of Geffen, he wanted to be Misakein, that Chet of Adam Arishon. And he failed. If you read the Chumash and the Midrashim, he transformed into a lowlife. He lost his clothes and sexually abused his wife. It's talking about his wife's tent. Read the Midrashim. He failed totally. So the Zohar says in Parshas Lech Lecha that Avraham Avinu decided to going down to Egypt to meet the serpent of the Nile, so to speak. And he wanted to go there and fix things. And he succeeded. And when it says, Yetzer b'rechush gadol, yitnu matanosh, that means he was capable of going into a society which had a lot to give to humanity, but it was so decrepit, could he go there and get the good things out of it without losing himself. I say this about, we also go down back, ultimately back to the Western world, in our multidisciplined world, etc. What are the tools we can take that I can get good things from this reality and grow and be a very special person and not drown into the abyss of that culture? How can we be a Rambam, which was enhanced by the unbelievable culture of the time, and use it kol kulai in the most beautiful way possible? How can we go down to Egypt? I think of New York as an unbelievable Egypt. You go to the billboards, man, we have these billboards which are advertisements for women's swimwear, and it looks more like they're advertising strings. And that's the society you're living in, and that's what your children see, and then you want them to wear tzitzis with tchelis. You should put tzitzis on their faces. So what do you want afterwards? What little girl wants to get dressed and how? Just think of what we're doing. How can we be there and extract the beauty and the importance of Western culture, which is a tremendous mine full of unbelievable ideas and thoughts? It's beyond the beauty of Chachmas Ma'ariv. How can we take that Berechush Gadol to walk out and just leave the garbage there and not to be affected from it? And this was the question that Avraham Avinu said. The Zohar continues, he says, Imi no achoisiat. So the Zohar says, Chama ima shchina, he saw the shchina, and I'm going to explain what this means at length, just get to a point. He was praying to God. That God, please be my sister, not my wife. Now, what does that mean? You know, work very hard to get your wife, to court her, this, all your life you're courting her. Are you kidding? I got married in 73, I'm still courting my wife. For me, not to be at home tonight and stay here, it's Pashut Mesiras Nefesh. There's no way. It's not who I am. But you know what? You do that way because you know the truth of the matter is you can always lose her. If the relationship isn't constantly nurtured, it can be lost. And that's a relationship I can also have with God. Great relationship. I acquired it. I did great things. I learned tremendous things in Israel, whatever you're going to call it. I enhanced myself. But if it's just like my wife, I can lose it. When I go and I encounter the culture of Egypt, and I mean to say the culture that we are all going to be going back to, you can lose that too. They will snap the Kedusha away from you, friends. They'll say, oh, you flipped out, huh? Should I go on? Oh, you flipped, huh? Come on, man. Don't you remember Joni? You know, go on further. You know, come on, what's with you? It's unbelievable. How do you do it? So he says, God, I don't want you to be my wife. I know that you want me to acquire my Yiddishkeit and my Yerushalayim and work hard for it and don't want to give me presents. I need you to be my sister. You know what that means? I didn't do anything to have my sister. I didn't make her. Sorry, you know, my dad and mom did. I'm stuck with her. I can't get rid of her. Even if I wanted to get rid of her, I can't get rid of her. That relationship is just part of who I am. So he prays to God to all my acquisitions that I made in my great, Mesiras Nefesh. I just may lose it all when I go to meet Egypt, the serpent in Egypt, just as Noach lost everything. Adam failed. I want to succeed. I pray to you, help me internalize everything I acquired that should become just who I am, part of who I am. Not what I do, not what I think, but who I am. It should become my nature. It should be me, not something taught to me. It should be me. Something that you can't lose. You can't lose things who are essentially you. Did you ever read Man in Search of Meaning by Viktor Frankl? You can take away a person's total acquisitions. You can't take away his identity, basic identity. No, if your Yiras Shamayim becomes who you are, not what you do or what you're supposed to do, that will never leave you. If it's an acquired things, yeah, I flipped out in Israel, my rabbi said do this and do that, and I'm carrying it around like a cross, you can lose it. I remember the commentator once had this unbelievable cartoon about this typical American kid with the hockey stick and the big hair of the 60s and this, jacket and the works, going into the Israel machine. Walks out of the Israel machine, there's no hockey stick. He's carrying a big Gemara with the tzitzis and, and a little beardle and a shaved head. Then he goes back into the YU machine and he comes out immediately again with the hockey stick and the big thing all over again. This was in the commentator way a long time ago, believe me. I haven't seen the commentator in 20 years, but that's what it was. So if it's only your wife, you go through the Israel machine and the YU machine. It's simple as that. And between you and me, between the hot Ma'ariv and the other hot stuff on in society, the hot Ma'ariv will lose. I can tell you right now. And they lose, they fall so fast, you don't know what hit them. It's always interesting to see how people come to Israel and firm out. The girls become firmer than the guys usually. The girls, sorry, I don't talk to boys anymore. That's how it starts, After a while, the guy follows suit, but the girls do it very fast. It's very interesting to notice that. Seminary, they become firm very fast. How long does it last? I'll tell you how long it lasts. I was once on a plane, I used to travel. And here I was going, after this mountain, I had to go to America for 2 days after Purim. And on the plane, I don't want to say from what schools, some of them I recognize from the Bchinos I used to do way back. And they are there with these big kippas and the tcheles, and the girls are all like, they're sitting next to each other and having a party as if we're back in the old days in Teaneck. You understand? I mean, it lasted until the airport. They sang around the Madura and Abdullah Kuchabrichu. They did all the great things. They danced and they had the chavayot, megapshot, all the, they sat at the kumbaya on the rooftops and they rolled their things and they bought tcheles. Ad kan, as soon as you got into the plane, you could see it, the whole thing was gone. Don't talk to boys, and now you're a queen bee in the middle of the whole group on the plane. I was disgusted. Thank God none of them were from Keren Biavna. I would have kicked them out in those days. But this is a reality. The key is imina achoisiat. If the Shechina will be my sister, that's what the Zohar says. Choma ima Shechina. When he looked at Sori, he saw the Shechina. That's something which has to be explained. I'm not doing it tonight. He prayed to the Shechina before I go down to the decrepit society of Egypt. I need you, Shechina, to be my sister, not my wife. I need you to be internalized, my second nature. Without this will not last. And the Zohar says, because of that tefillah, he went there, extracted the rechush gadol that he could from Egypt, and that's the matanos. Walked out a perfected person, and he won. Vidi, vidi, vici. I arrived, I encountered, I was successful. Because he learned the secret of internalizing experiences, not just having them and carrying them. Now that ultimately answers our question. Yes, that's why this conversation is very important. This conversation teaches us the value of aesthetics versus attractive and simple language. It teaches us a key of how we're supposed to utilize the time we're here in order to internalize those values, that we actually become who we are, not what we do. So it won't just be good speeches and vorts. and all those emotional hype, which is very important, should only be tools to really thinking and internalizing values. That's a very important thing. It's those values, if they're internalized, that will last and make a big difference, and you'll walk out of the Israel machine, hopefully not with the tzitzis and this, just a normal, healthy, balanced thinking, halacha-oriented, source-oriented, geula-directed person, and you will not lose any of that. You won't even flip out, which will be great. You'll be normal. You'll be normal. Don't buy a Borsalino, please. Okay? Keep your checked shirts on. Don't buy whites. All those are simanim of people that are afraid to change, so they run away into denial. I always say, if a guy suddenly grows a beard, I ask him, what's the name of the girl you're running away from? It's as simple as that. Externalities are running away from dealing with real issues, not allowing you to internalize things. You figure you put on cosmetics and run away. Yes, I will then be able to extract the beauty of Western culture. I really think it's important to read Thomas Mann. I think it's important to know C.S. Lewis. I think it's important to read the Confessions of Aquinas. But first, you have to be able to know how to read Fathers of the Church and stay religious. I think all these things are important. As a person will miss any part of the world culture, he's going to miss a big part of Yedias Hashem. The Rambam writes this. But the Rambam first says you have to know Shas. You first have to, so the Rambam said, before you deal in anything else, you have to have your religion so secure that if you'll have philosophical problems in religion, you won't drop religion, you'll drop philosophy. That's how internalized your religion has to be. It's not, dropping religion will not be an option. Anything negating it, you will drop that. And I'm saying you shouldn't be dropping all these things. Some of these things are very important. Let me show you how to reconcile. Mari Nevuchim is not to protect religion, it's to protect philosophy. That's what the Rambam writes. People think it's a book of protecting religion. It isn't. That's not the purpose of the book. He only writes the book for people that there's no option of leaving religion. That halacha is superior and supreme, and there's no way I can walk away from it. That includes anything which is not halachic is muktzim machmas mius. Now, please don't go back to America and become God's prophet. You'll be aided. Keep your mouth shut. Just go away from where it doesn't have to be. That's all. Keep your eyes in your sockets and your hands in your pockets, as one says. Okay, train yourselves to think, to ask, source reality. That's the name of the game. Okay, guys, that should be enough for today. A lot of things to think about. Have a great Wednesday night. Bye. Shalom Matan.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
טוב, תודה רבה.
End meeting.
Thank you, Rabbi.